LM Radio was South Africa's only music radio station which started broadcasting in 1936 and set the standard for adult contemporary radio from 1950 to its close in October 1975. Chris Turner talks to some of the people who made LM Radio the #1 music station. Today, he is talking to John Berks. This is part 2.
John Berks was a highly regarded and well-known radio presenter and broadcaster in South Africa. He started out in music radio at LM Radio in Mozambique, and he was one of South Africa's first talk show radio hosts. I've had the privilege of knowing John and chatted with him on a number of occasions about his time on radio, and I'll be bringing you extracts from my fireside chat with John over a number of episodes. We pick up the story with John when he arrived in Lorenzo Marx, now Maputo, for the very first time. And then, John, you ended up going down to Lorenzo Marx and settling there, and you were there for about 6 or 7 years, weren't you?
Yes, I was there for about close on 5 years. Stayed. I'll never forget the day I arrived. Daryl Euster. You see, I painted up, like I suppose most kids, this dream picture of this marvelous island called Lorenzo Marx. I always thought of it as an island where all these star radio folk were broadcasting from. So when we were flying over, I think from, in those days, Jan Smuts Airport, which is now Johannesburg International, to Lorenzo Marx Airport, which is now Maputo, I'd already broken out into a nervous rash of shingles from all this, the nerve, the build-up to this great moment. And now the moment had arrived, the arrival in Lorenzo Marx, and there was this little Mercedes-Benz taxi. Martins was the taxi driver. Little did I know that he was the official taxi driver for members of staff of Lorenzo Marx Radio. Anyway, Martins said, "Bon dia, como está?" which meant good morning, and how are you? You the new Luctora, the new radio announcer, and Mr. David Davies has asked me to come and fetch you and take you off to the radio club. And driving through Lorenzo Marx, I mean, it was just like a little kid with a dream come true. I was absorbing it all. I'd never ever been to a Portuguese territory in my life. And, Lorenzo Marx really, once you'd left Komatipoort, the border of South Africa, and Lorenzo Marx, it was like you were suddenly catapulted into Europe. Everything about Lorenzo Marx was different, the lifestyle, the currency, the food, the people, everything was different. So you can imagine this kid touching down in Lorenzo Marx and then driving off to the place that he dreamt about, the radio club, for the first time. And there to meet me was Daryl Euster. And I shall remember the very first day spent in Lorenzo Marx. Daryl, who turned out to be just the most unbelievable broadcaster, a man with an imagination that I think could have only been matched by Disney. He said to me, "Well, we've got to go off to the play fair because they've got the playground is very busy today. They've got the swings and all the other things that you get at play fairs." And I thought, how strange, a playground, a play fair. What do you call them? A fairground in Lorenzo Marx. And that was my first afternoon spent. Evie Martin, who was like a mum to all the young guys, Daryl, myself, David Gresham, she booked me into. She made sure that it was a good pensar because she wanted me to feel very comfortable, and that was the Pensar Pilana. And I had to catch the 23 in the morning the next day to meet Evie Martin at the radio club, and those are just little moments I'll never forget. The first night in Lorenzo Marx, waking up in the morning and realizing the dream had come true, and now I was about to hop the bus and go off to the radio club for the first time.
John, can you tell me a little bit about the studios at the radio club and just how things work technically and organizationally?
If memory serves me right, we had 2 studios in Lorenzo Marx. I think a lot of people thought the radio club, consisted of of everything that LM radio was all about, which is untrue because all the floors were occupied by the local Mozambique radio, the Radio Club de Mozambique. We were obviously the only English section, Lorenzo Marx Radio. We were on the second floor. We had two studios, only two, El Tres, L3, and El Cuatro, L4. So truthfully, and we had a little sound booth where we could listen to the latest gramophone recordings in those days, and a room that was called the Spot Room, where we housed all the commercials that were played on the radio. But truthfully, we only had two studios, L3 and L4.
And in those days, of course, everything was done either on turntables or on cart machine, weren't they?
Oh yeah, in '64 when I started, the commercials were played off. David Davies used to refer to them as shellac. Now don't forget to take your shellacks in, and I suppose shellac would be, remember those big slabs of shellac, which was a 33 and a third, or 78. Sorry, they were actual 78, slightly larger than, if you can recall, what a 78 looked like. They were the commercials. And then the records in those days, I think, were 45 RPMs, or extended 45s, a couple of 33 and a thirds, and then obviously LP tracks of 33 and a third. So your commercials and the music were carried into the studio in these massive piles of shellac.
John, could you describe the studio for us? You had a control desk and you had these turntables and so on, but I believe that you also had a chair on wheels that would run backwards and forwards.
Yeah, we had the horseshoe console with, as you correctly said, a chair that was mobile on little railway tracks, two little tracks, so that you could set up a disc at turntable 1 and then slide across to turntable 2 and then move back to 3 and then move up to 4. And you do all the panel operating yourself, and I was technically very stupid and made a lot of mistakes, but it was fun, and you had a good feel by doing it yourself. You felt a part of it. You played the music yourself, you played the commercials yourself, and we used to have these big commercial, we called them spot logs, that would tell you exactly when the commercial breaks took place and how many commercials were stacked within that particular bracket. So you'd have to take a hold of that massive shellac and say, oh, it's whatever the drink would be, a soft drink, stroke 1, stroke 30 seconds, stroke E, and then you'd have to set it up on track 1, wind it up on audition, set it up, and then switch the plug over to program, and then slide back to the first record, which would be track 2 off an Elvis 33 and a third long player. So you'd have to swing the key back onto audition, set that one up through your earphones, and then push the plug back on the program, and then head back to the microphone and introduce the commercial and pray that you'd set it up at the right speed, and then go into your first disc.
And John, did you do your own program compilation, or did you have a producer or program compiler who helped you put the music together, or the running order of the music?
When I first started in '64, there were certain programs that we programmed ourselves, but otherwise the music mix was put together by a musical director or a program director, And then obviously as it became more sophisticated, we moved from just ordinary contemporary music to the strict format of top 40. The music was very well researched, and we had a musical director, and you had to stick to the playlist, because that was the crime of crimes if you moved away from the playlist. But yep, in the beginning, there were certain programs that we, as disc jockeys, compiled ourselves. Yeah.
And that was John Berks' initiation into LM radio in Mozambique. And we'll be picking up the story in the next episode, and we'll be delighting you with some of his stories.
That was Chris Turner talking to John Berks. watch out for Part 3. Visit www.lmradio.co.mz and check out the historical pages.